Who ready? Who? We ready? Who?
Saturday night, March 9th. Welcome into the second installment of the Built in Buffalo Founders Pod. I am one of your co-hosts, DM3. If you wanted to follow me on X, that would be David Myers at BIB. I am joined by my co-host, Akeem Richens. Before I get his intro, we have had a crazy week. I think everybody's phone notifications have been going crazy. I know there's been a ton of content out there about all the guys that we're getting ready to talk about. Akeem and myself thought it would be a great opportunity for us to kind of put our own spin on things. We had a completely different show lined up. We were going to focus solely on the free agency on the defensive side of the ball, similar to what we did last week. But that all got thrown, a monkey wrench got thrown in our way. But we're going to navigate through this. We want to talk about the guys that have meant so much to this team for the last 7 years. So, ARich, how you feeling, my guy?
ARich, Akeem Richens. If you don't know me by now, if you don't know us by now, please get to know us. We are indeed a part and the founders of the Built in Buffalo brand. DM3. I'm doing great, man. It was a purge that we endured this week on a Wednesday.
Purge is a good word to use.
We're usually accustomed to like after dark being, nighttime being, everything settled, the dust has settled, and bam, being hits you. But on Wednesday, he did everything during the day. He got his coffee and he said, you know what? It's time to get to work. And boy, did he get to work in a busy day at One Bills Drive.
How long do you think, honestly, because he was making the rounds at the Combine, I think he was on the Pat McAfee show. He did a couple other spots, and he was always asked about, 40 plus million over the cap. What's going on? What are you going to do? And there was conversations and questions asked about Jordan Poyer. There was questions asked about some of the other players. How long do you think that this was the plan, or do you think this is something that kind of happened in the last couple of weeks, kind of came to fruition the last few days? Like, what's your thoughts? Like, is this something as soon as the season was over, he took a hard, deep look at this roster and how it was constructed and the age of these players and the contracts and stuff like that? How long do you think that this was planned? Was it premeditated? Was it something that just kind of came up? What do you think?
I believe that this year was the year they realized, the Buffalo Bills brass, that staff. I believe this was the year they realized that if we can't hoist that Lombardi trophy and accomplish that ultimate goal, it may be time for a breakup and breaking up these guys because we haven't won the Super Bowl. Right. So how much times are you going to go with the same team and not getting that maximum result that you strive for? Though granted, great success, a lot of great memories and moments and times and fun-filled laughters as Buffalo Bills as a fan base these last several years. But the ultimate goal wasn't achieved. And when it's not achieved, and now you have aging players and declining players on contracts that is not financially suitable for the Buffalo Bills at the time, changes have to be made. So I believe this year's the year Brandon Beane and company knew that things had to be shaken up if they don't get that maximum result in obtaining a Lombardi trophy.
I think too that the writing has been on the wall, and we've heard little whispers for a couple years now about a youth movement, right? We've heard, we've had these guys on the team for a while, and it's not like, we all knew that Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Mitch Morse, some of these other guys, they weren't getting any younger. And you and me have had many conversations about the safety position. We've talked for years, I feel like, since we were doing this podcast 4 years ago, we were talking about how they need to address the safety position in the draft. And even if it's not to start, you get an heir apparent to Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. And it being here, I think it's still kind of surreal to me, because if you want to look at it from an aspect of, we haven't known anything else in the secondary as far as the safety position since Sean McDermott has been here. Mm-hmm. Those guys were the constant. Mm-hmm. And Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have both said how much of a privilege it was to have those guys back there. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna dig into all this. Before we do that, let's handle some business. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up. That helps our algorithm so we can get more eyes on the show, more eyes on the brand and what we're trying to do over here. Please hit the subscribe button. That way we can grow the following. Please hit the notification bell so that you know when just not only our show, but all of the rest of the shows on the channel go live. If you're watching on Facebook, like and share, comment. Wherever you're watching, comments are huge. We like to see the comments. If you guys want to head on YouTube, we definitely will pull those. That's a priority for us. And if you're watching on X, please go ahead and like and share or repost. So
Definitely
a lot of guys to talk about. I have 2 pages worth of transactions that happened just this week.
right.
It took some due diligence, a lot of looking at Spot Track, a lot of looking at OTC. So with all these guys, Akeem, where do you think it's fitting for us to start with the guys that are no longer on the roster? It's the end of an era. Which one do you want to start with?
Now, and I like how you indulged a little bit in that safety position and Jordan Poyer in that tandem, and I want to go there next. But first, I believe we should discuss the release of Tre'Davious White. That was one that the writing probably has been on the wall with Trey White, right? Releasing him opens up post June 1st designation. A release opens up over $10 million in cap space. And when you have a guy that has played 10 games in 2 years and had 2 significant injuries back to back with a ACL tear and with an Achilles, it was kind of the inevitable, right? Especially with the Buffalo Bills cap situation. So DM3, tell us how you feel about the release of Trey White and what he brought, how he fits, and how he was a part of this Bills era that went from drought joke of a franchise to one of the more formidable, well-run organizations in the NFL.
I mean, it's, trying to keep all the emotions aside, because I think both you and me agree that we understand the business side of football pretty good, right?
Mhm.
We try to keep our emotions away from, what we do, especially with this show. And that's kind of how we've been. I mean, he's ever going to be linked to Sean McDermott because he's his first draft pick as a head coach, right? That's the
Very
first pick.
one.
He's always going to be linked to the Buffalo Bills because they traded that pick and the
He's a
Chiefs
star.
drafted Patrick Mahomes. So there's always going to be that scenario, right? I thought, honestly, when we were going to do this show, I was doing some pre-stuff notes earlier in the week, and I honestly thought that Tre'Davious White could be a candidate to get an extension to kind of alleviate money this year. Not thinking that he was going to become Tre'Davious White All-Pro, but to kind of alleviate the salary cap. I also thought that there was a big chance that this was going to happen. 6.2 million dead cap this year, 4 million dead cap next year. But like you said, after June 1st, you save over $10 million, which essentially can go towards the draft class and some last minute additions heading into camp. But I mean, how could you not like Tre'Davious White? I mean, if you're a Buffalo Bills fan, you've been following this guy for 7 years. You know what he meant in that locker room. He was one of the guys that I think a lot of the fans resonated with because he was a character guy, right? He was one of those guys that would show you his emotions. He was a guy that came in and we believed that, we defended Tre'Davious White whenever there was slander on social media, right? He's a top 5 DB. And I think he had that connection of the Bills fans, whether it be him doing, the Buffalo Goalie Academy stuff or him dancing on, on the field and reading the pictures of the plays when that one game. Remember when that picture flew in and he was reading that, or if
I believe
it's
that was against the Dolphins.
dancing behind the ref doing the first down stuff or pretending to be Dak Prescott. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about, but of all the moves, this probably is the least surprising to me because we haven't been used to seeing Tre'Davious White on the field. I mean, let's be honest. We haven't seen him play consistently in 3 years. So I don't want to say that the Rasul Douglas trade and, how the growing of Christian Benford into the player that he is made this a little bit easier for me to swallow. But I think that it was one of those moves where you probably, if you're a diehard fan, you probably thought that this could happen. But I don't know. I mean, I'm like I said, in a shameless plug here, I put a video out today called "End of an Era." It's got Tre'Davious White, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer out there, just because I think we all connected with Tre'Davious White on some level or another. I think we all thought that All-Pro Trey was going to be a lockdown corner for this team, but unfortunately, injuries happen. And it sucks, but it's part of the game. It's a combative sport, like you always like to say, and it's just something that happens. So
I'm going to miss Tre'Davious White.
I like I said, I'm pulling back a lot of emotion, and I probably will throughout this entire show, just because of that connection as content creators that we've had. We look at these players differently, I think, because we watch so much of what they do, not just the games on Sundays. We look at film, we look at practice, we look at social media clips, we follow them all over social media. Like we don't interact with them, but we follow what's going on with them as not just a member of the team. So I think, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I feel like
you're fine. I cut you off.
I feel like a lot of what I've seen out there in the past 2 days has been a lot of emotion-based reactions from the fans, which is okay. I'm never going to be that guy that's going to tell people how they should fan and how they should react to things. But having a couple of days to think about it, like, it's definitely something that the business aspect of it has never been more prevalent than it was this week. So to me, that's how I'm taking it. And I think I'm going to miss the guy. And I hope he lands on his feet, but I don't know.
And that's the thing about the NFL and being an NFL fan and having these emotional connections and attachment to these players because of their play and because of their personalities, their styles, their antics. And when the business aspect of the NFL comes into play, we do have our emotions tied to it and tied to these players. And that is something that us as fans have to step back and say, you know what? I understand that I have a lot of love for player X or player Y or player Z, but we are Buffalo Bills fans at the end of the day. We are Bills fans first and foremost, and we happen to gain a connection to players because they become a part of the Buffalo Bills organization. And that's the type of mentality I had to have as an individual in order for me not to get too emotionally attached or too emotionally involved in what I call the purge in this week. So we got to understand that we can love players, we can miss players, and we can have a type of connection. But at the end of the day, we are Buffalo Bills fans, and we'll be all right. And they'll move on, and we'll move on as well. But as far as losing a Tre'Davious White and what he's meant, two-time Pro Bowl, 2019 All-Pro selection for the Buffalo Bills, I believe from the time Trey White got drafted in 2017 to the 11th game in 2021, maybe 2020, but that's 2017 to 2021, that 4 or 5 year span. Trey White was a top 10 corner in this NFL. And that's because of his versatility, his instinctive playmaking ability, being able to orchestrate a cover 3 zone defense that Sean McDermott likes to covet. And at that time, coming in as a new head coach, coming in trying to implement a new defense, the cornerback position was an essential one for Sean McDermott and that defense in order to be successful. So Trey White orchestrated, along with Jordan Poyer, along with Micah Hyde, along with a lot of other players, that is in the end of this era. These guys are the pivotal components of the drought era. And a lot of these guys may be up for Wall of Fame discussions for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and we have to think too that Tre'Davious White was an essential draft pick at now looking back at Sean McDermott's defense and how it's constructed. He was the perfect player to put into that position and be successful. So I hope he lands on his feet somewhere. I'm sure he's going to get offers out there. I'm sure he's going to go try out for teams and he's going to be on an NFL roster. There's no doubt that there's absolutely a place for Tre'Davious White in the NFL still.
Get healthy. We hope he get healthy.
Yeah, let's just hope he gets healthy and comes back and he can compete. That's all we can ask for. All right, so let's talk about Jordan Poyer. And I might go in a bunch of different directions on this because it's just a lot of stuff has kind of hit me all at once with Jordan Poyer. Like there was pros and cons, and then there was more pros and cons, and I kind of battled within myself for a bunch of this stuff. But all in all, it comes out to be positive on this. So we all know what Jordan Poyer means to the secondary of the Buffalo Bills. We saw playing through the elbow injury, playing through the rib injury last year, driving to Kansas City. We know he had he tore his meniscus apparently in the last game of the season and had surgery after the season. That hasn't really come out. I don't think publicly, not a lot of people were talking about that. I don't think that lays in or that's a part of what happened. But Jordan Poyer to me is a guy that was kind of discarded by two NFL franchises in the Cleveland Browns and the Philadelphia Eagles. And what Sean McDermott was able to have with him and Micah Hyde, I don't think will ever be duplicated. Now, I say that only to say this because I think Sean McDermott is a safety guru, and I think that's kind of what he can do. But what he was able to do last year and the year before, especially when Micah Hyde went down the year before and he missed almost all the season, he's a leader. You see it on the field. You hear about it in the locker room. He's one of the guys that is at the podium after a win, after a loss. He's the guy that's going to give you what you want, on the field 24/7. So to me, he's 33 years old and he's an aging safety. Not saying that he can't play in this system and be productive, but the leadership aspect to me, I think, is one of the things that's going to be missed the most. What's your thoughts on Jordan Poyer and how did this hit you? Because I think we had conversations, you and me, outside of social media. We had conversations about Jordan Poyer, and I was very boisterous saying that I would not be surprised if he is not on the roster, basically because of the salary and the cap situation and things like that, on top of the fact that he got injured a bunch last year and he played through it admirably. He played through it. So what's your initial thoughts?
I was initially I understood the numbers and the cap aspect of things, but when I was looking and I was looking at roster construction, I'm like, Micah Hyde is a free agent. Taylor Rapp is a free agent. Jordan Poyer is the only guy under contract right now. So I know that he had a significant cap number for the Buffalo Bills, but I was thinking that he showed enough last year. Now, there were times where we saw him take some angles and running backs got in open space. We saw some times where he got beat. We saw some times where he didn't possess that long speed. But overall, he still possessed a high IQ, enough athletic ability, and he continued to display that versatility. He lined up in the box a number of times. He played the deep thirds. He played that safety position. He played nickel a lot once we had to battle through injury and a lot of different sub packages. So he showed his worth still at his advanced age at 33. So when the release came, because the Buffalo Bills lacked that depth at the safety position, I was surprised. I'm thinking at worst, the Buffalo Bills may get some young safeties and he can tutor these young safeties before he rides off into the sunset. And obviously that sunset came a year early, but Jordan Poyer is a guy is another guy that's a part of that core, with Trey White, a part of that core with his running mate in Micah Hyde. And Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, these guys exemplify Buffalo. They exemplify the Buffalo Bills. Jordan Poyer was a seventh-round pick, from the Cleveland Browns that was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
You know, he lacerated his kidney, only playing 6 games his last year with the Cleveland Browns. And Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, they saw something in Jordan Poyer long before any of us did. And they was able to get him on a deal at that time might have been an overpay for Jordan Poyer. 4 years, $13 million. He didn't do anything at that time to deserve that kind of money. But when you exemplify Buffalo, you exemplify hard work and the grind. And being a 7th-round pick, Micah Hyde, talk about him a little bit, being a 5th-round pick. They was cast-offs. Philly didn't want him. Cleveland didn't want him. Green Bay didn't want Micah Hyde, right? So they was guys that was cast-offs, was underappreciated with their previous teams, came to Buffalo, became household names and stars and appreciated with the Buffalo Bills. And I couldn't express enough gratitude for Jordan Poyer and his services for his 7 years.
You know what? It also makes me feel when we talk about Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde when they came over here, we talk about, you know, they weren't really considered all pros. They weren't really considered consistent Pro Bowl players. That makes me really confident at what we can do to replace them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that makes me feel good about finding the right replacements for them, because Brandon Beane wasn't here when Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer came over. We were still under Doug Whaley at that point because this was before the draft. So that probably was heavily on Sean McDermott. And hey, are these guys? Because it's something you can work with. Are these guys that you can put in your system? And what do you think about this? And it's the skill set, right? So that I'm very confident in the fact that Sean McDermott in the secondary, whether it be corners or safeties, develops talent really well, it seems like. So we do have that going. I'm going to throw this at you. I said it before just because I want to play devil's advocate here. And it's probably going to get a reaction in the chat. Never say never for either Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer.
I think I think, you know, it was a great run. It's been a great 7 years.
Agreed.
They both been Iron Man. They both show versatility, durability, the heart of Buffalo Bills and what they represent being a Buffalo Bill. But I think this is the end of an era in terms of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and any chance of them re-signing for the Buffalo Bills.
One thing that the fan in me, not the content creator in me, really wishes we would have been able to see those guys on a parade float in Buffalo. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's probably got to be one of the things that's kind of like a gut punch to them, is that and Micah Hyde even said it when they were doing like locker clean out and all that stuff at the end of the year. Like, we came here and there wasn't a lot of winning going on. Talking about Jordan Poyer and himself. Like, we came here and there wasn't a lot of winning going on. There wasn't a lot of high touted free agents coming through here. And we were a huge catalyst for where this team is now. And I just think it would have been really special just to see those guys, win a championship and hoist a Lombardi. So, all right, if you haven't already, smash the like button, please, so we got over 500 people in here and we only got 10 likes. So can we fix that? Is that possible?
Please.
We appreciate it. I know Akeem would greatly appreciate it. That way we can shoot up those algorithms on all the social platforms. All right. One that kind of took me by surprise, but then I went back and watched our show from last week, and I feel like we knew.
Okay.
I feel like you had like a sixth sense.
Possibly. You know how we do.
Mitch Morse. Now, hold on. We have a group chat, a Facebook group chat with all the content creators in Built in Buffalo. And I go on these long voice rants that Akeem laughs at and makes fun of me for, and just random thoughts. Sometimes I'll just throw in a voice message. And I talked about Mitch Morse way back when, after the season ended, because he went and did an interview with Eric Wood and was asked, "Are you going to be back?" And Mitch Morse said, "If the Bills want me back, I would love to be back, but I don't know." So I went in our group chat after I watched that, and I said, "I don't think Mitch Morse is coming back." And I got laughed at by everybody because they said there's no way. Who cares about the 8.5 million? Like, he's on his last year. He's got to be here. We don't have a contingency plan. And then what happens this week? Ryan Bates gets traded. And then we talked about it on our show last week. I said that Ryan Bates was not the answer at center, even to be a backup if Mitch Morse went down.
Correct.
So it's a little shocking because I feel like we went from having a great offensive line that we talked about on our show last week. At that point, we had all 5 guys coming back. So now we lost a depth guy. We lost our center. We have Connor McGovern moving to center. And then we got David Edwards, who's going to play left guard. At least that's what we think is going to happen. So what was your initial take on Mitch Morse? And then having some time to think on it, how do you think this affects camaraderie and consistency and leadership and all that stuff now that he's been released? 8.5 million in savings, by the way.
Yeah, and like I said last week, if the Buffalo Bills were to release a Mitch Morse, they would save a significant number in cap space. I don't think they should do it because of continuity and things of that sort. But obviously, the Buffalo Bills did go ahead and release Mitch Morse. Center's important position, man. Communicating shifts, blocking adjustments, reading defenses. That is definitely an important position, and I think it was crucial at that time to have a Mitch Morse when you had rookie Josh Allen in 2019. Yep. You have a rookie, you want to get that guy that's a veteran, that's a good communicator, that's a good leader, to have that presence to mask some type of discrepancies your young quarterback may have in his young career. But now that I got to sit back and I got to realize and think things through, I understand that at the end of the day, once again, we have to take our emotional attachments out of certain equations. This is a business, and Mitch Morse, he did carry a significant cap number. And I'm going to think, just like I feel Taylor Rapp was a contingency plan all along. We'll get into that later. I feel that Connor McGovern was another contingency plan all along for the Bills, and a longer-term investment, obviously, the first year, because he has that versatility to play multiple positions along the offensive line. And he played the guard for the Dallas Cowboys. He was able to play center this year, but I'm pretty sure there was the internal discussions between his agent, the Bills coaching staff. He had some murmur to know and understand that a shift to the center position could be a possibility. So the Buffalo Bills, when I seen those moves made, was I surprised? In hindsight, yes. But do I feel the Buffalo Bills had this plan constructed for a while and they have ideas and how they want to construct the offensive line going forward? Yes, I believe they do. They had that findings and ideas as well coming towards the end of the season. But Mitch Morse will definitely be missed. Yeah,
that's good insight, because I think we talked last year about Taylor Rapp, and I think we all thought that was like a trial. That was like a dry run, right? Like, let's see what this guy can do. He's not going to get starting snaps unless one of these guys goes down. Is this something that, he can be a contingency plan? And we all talked about it last year. But that's really good insight about Connor McGovern, knowing how much Brandon Beane loves flexibility, right? For a lot of the guys, especially on the offensive line. I mean, they had Ryan Bates, and they highly coveted Ryan Bates. Like, I think they really wanted it to work out to where he could become a starting right guard. It just happens that Osiris Torrance just was better, because you never know how the draft's going to line up, right? So you got guys under contract. You keep ones that can play at the position, but then the draft, played out the way it did. So between Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, and Mitch Morse, 294 combined games for the Buffalo Bills. That's insane. That's insane. Definitely an end of an era. And I think the biggest part of this, and this is what I want to kind of touch on for just a minute, and kind of threw this at you last minute when we were doing show prep. How does this affect team leadership? Because I think we just took a huge hit in that department as far as leadership. And this is affecting both sides of the ball, not just offense, but defense. So to me, Jordan Poyer, I already talked about how much I thought he was a leader. He was always the guy that was the rah-rah guy on the sideline. You could tell he was always getting fired up on the field. Whenever he made a hit, he was always posing, doing all that stuff. He had that kind of alpha feel to him, right? Mitch Morse was a leader, but he was kind of the guy that was, I don't want to say a father figure, but because he's only 31 years old, but I see him as kind of like the father figure of the offensive line, if that makes sense. Kind of the guy that was just kind of like the rock, and he was like the steady hand that played the center position. And like you alluded to about how, matchups and schemes and all that kind of stuff, blocking assignments and things like that. But it's got to be tough for Josh because he'll have a new full-time center for the first time in a long time. And that's a trust relationship that you build with your center over time. Not just that, but he had to have been mentoring Osiris Torrance and some of these other guys. So what's your take on, do you think that Josh needs to take on a bigger leadership role now? Because we all know Josh is not going to be the guy that consistently is going to get in your face and yell. He's not going to be consistently waving a towel, standing on the bench. He will do that occasionally, right? And I think he does a leadership thing just fine. He always goes out in front of the cameras and says and does the right things. But do you think that the Bills now have some sort of, they need to find more leadership in other guys? Or how do you feel overall about the whole leadership aspect and what we just lost in that locker room?
And I like this discussion. I like this conversation about leadership and what it means. And I don't think it could be overstated to teams, to good teams, and into locker rooms. The reason why Von Miller was able to come into the Buffalo Bills because they had that veteran presence. The reason why he didn't have to come in and be vocal immediately because they had that veteran presence. They had Micah Hyde. They had Jordan Poyer. They had Mitch Morse to go along with Stephon Diggs and some other guys that they had. But when you lose those type of vocal leaders and leaders, period, other leaders are going to have to grow and step up into that leadership role. And I think Josh Allen is one of those guys that is going to have to step up and take on more of a vocal leadership role. And in a perfect world, this is how I describe leadership in a perfect world, right? There are two types of leaders on the football field. There's those leaders that are quiet. Matt Milano kind of leader. Matt Milano, he doesn't say much. He's quiet. He's going to bring his lunch pail to work. He's going to work hard every day, and he's going to show his leadership through his play. And then you have vocal leaders. You got guys that like to talk a little bit, Jordan Poyer. You have a Stephon Diggs who likes to talk and get vocal and have speeches. And I think those leaders are necessary as well. And in a perfect world, a football team should have both of those kind of leaders. Your lunch pail leaders, your quiet, go to work and produce on the field and show your work kind of leader. And then you should have your vocal leader as well. Those guys that can talk and have that prep talk and can say the right things at the right times. Why I say that? Because just like there are two types of leaders, there are two types of people that responds to leaderships. There are two types of responders. You have guys that will watch guys work hard and bring their lunch pail and get motivated that way. And then you have other type of responders that need that pep talk, that need that motivational speech. So in a perfect world, I think if you have two types of leaders, vocal and quiet and bring your lunch pail type of leaders, I think that will equate to an overall well-oiled machine in terms of locker room presence amongst players.
And I couldn't have said it any more perfect. Like that's spot on because that's the two players I just identified, Jordan Poyer and Mitch Morse. One guy you see it, one guy you just know because you've heard that he's doing it. So those three, I think Akeem and me both agreed that was they deserve to have a good conversation because those were the big names. Those are the guys that have been here. Those are the guys that have been the leaders on this team. And I absolutely wanted to touch base on those. We do have all of the other moves. I have them all categorized here. We're not going to spend as much time on them just for the sake of the length of the show. Plus, I think everybody's pretty well aware of all the moves the Bills made. If you're not, I can run through them real quick. Saron Neal, I think this is something that the writing was on the wall. The Bills were adding depth at positions that we thought that he was going to have a good run at, being maybe the backup to a Taron Johnson type deal, but we just never saw it play out defensively. He was more of a special teams guy. They save almost $3 million there. Deontay Hardy, I think the writing was kind of on the wall there. We talked about this. Me and Akeem talked about this heavily throughout the season. As soon as the season ended, I mean, we paid him $5 million last year for a punt return touchdown. Essentially was highly ineffective offensively.
Right.
We talked about it last week too. I think there might have been some stuff nagging possibly from the turf toe injury. They saved $4.2 million there. Naheem Hines, that already happened. We 4.6 mil there savings. Me and Akeem touched on that too. Like, that's just something we can't pay a running back coming back from an injury that we don't know what Naheem is going to get. And then we can get into Von Miller. I know that you want to talk about Von Miller, and I definitely wanted to dedicate some time talking about Von Miller and not just the contract numbers, because we had a really heated, not you and me, but we had a debate going in one of our group chats today about Von Miller. I'll throw the numbers out there. His base salary now is $1.5 million for 2024. He took a $7 million roster bonus, and it's a cap savings of $8.6 million. So to me, he has basically bet on himself. There's no other way you can look at it. He's got $11 million in incentives, and I haven't seen them, but I can guarantee they're going to be some of those terms you put at the bottom of a contract that are non-reachable incentives, probably stacks, games played, snaps played, making a Pro Bowl, being an All-Pro, things like that. All right, before I go, Akeem, tell me your initial thoughts first on Von Miller taking a pay cut, and then your initial thoughts on him probably being on the roster for the next 2 seasons based off of what they did with his contract. Honest, don't hold back.
So, as far as the Von Miller contract, right? I don't know how people felt when it initially happened. I know we was all excited. He was 33 years old. He signed a huge contract. We all thought that it would essentially be a 3-year deal. Well, things happen. It's a combative sport. Injuries happen. Now, it's a high possibility he can be on the team for his 35th year and 36-year-old seasons. As far as production, I understand that these players, we want to have maximum success as football players, especially when you have the contract you have, especially when you're supposed to come in and produce to the level you're supposed to come in and produce too. But when you have a significant injury, we have to scale back as fans a little bit. This is not, it was not a minor injury. This was an ACL tear. ACL tear for a 34-year-old player is something significant to overcome. And it's not impossible to overcome, but it is going to take some time. And last year, I believe, the arrest didn't help, right? Being in the news for the wrong reasons, for negative situations doesn't help, especially when you're not producing, when you're not capitalizing. So it was a rough year for Von Miller statistically, but I understood what he was going through. It wasn't going to be an easy thing trying to produce, even though you had the contract. When you just tore your ACL a year prior, you have to get back the strength in that knee. You have to get back the mental capacity to trust that knee again, to make those sharp cuts, to make those type of moves and ghost moves he's able to perform that he couldn't perform with the bulky knee last year. So this year, I'm hoping to see some semblance of the old Von Miller we've got accustomed to for the first 8 games in 2022, when he had 8 sacks in 11 games, when he was a force to get into the pass rusher. He had 45 hurries. He had, he had a forced fumble. He had 13 total tackles. PFF, take PFF for what it's worth, but he had above average grades across the board. And I think this year, will we see the same Von Miller in terms of elite play? Probably not, but I would like to see some impact in the game for Von Miller. I would like to see him get in the sack sheet for the Buffalo Bills this year, and I think he will. I think he is a generational talent that will get back some type of explosiveness and have some type of productivity this year. How much would it equate to the contract that he's gotten? I'm not sure, but I do expect Von Miller to make some type of impact.
Yeah, I agree. I think that at some point this season, and it all depends on a lot of things. It's not just line up Vaughn and he's going to go either get sacks, get hurries, make tackles for loss. That whole line needs to be looked at, right? We all know what we're getting from Ed Oliver. We got that, right? And the other guy we got on the end is Greg Rousseau, but who's lining up next to Ed Oliver? We still don't know that, right? And we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to Von Miller. You know, this was his second ACL injury, and I understand the other one was earlier in his career, but he's, like you said, 35, and he'll be 36 next year. And I believe he's going to be here for 2 years. I don't think even if he has an average season that he's going to be gone next year. I think that there's a relationship built in there with Brandon Beane. And if you call me naive or whatever, I don't care. I think that Von Miller, when looking at this contract, put his general manager hat on, because we all know that's what he wants to be when he's done with football. And he said, I'm betting on myself that for 2 years, I can give you the best Von Miller that I can be at 35 and 36, and I can be productive for you. I will take a $1.5 million base salary to be here, so you can have $7 million or $8.6 million to use to staff this team, to help roster this team. And say what you want. People say, well, yeah, because he stinks, that's why he took a pay cut. No, I think there's part of it that I think Vaughn just wants to win, like all the rest of the Bills players do. He wants to win. He doesn't need the $8 million. Like, Vaughn's going to retire and be just fine. So I think there's more to it than that. I think it's all based off of scheme and the players they add and surrounding pieces that are going to help Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau and Von Miller. So there's more to it than that. So I feel like he's going to be back in the fold. I don't think he's going to have an 8 or 10 sack season, but I think we're going to see some respectable production from Von Miller, and it may take some time. Who knows? He may come out of training camp and still be a little slow and be a little sloppy, but you know, he's a professional and he's been doing this for a very long time. And I think we just need to let the process play out before we judge what's going on in front of us. And I think he'll get to a place where he is a very serviceable edge rusher and he can be productive for the Bills on defense. That's all I'm going with that.
And the important thing about that is your surrounding pieces. What are you surrounding? Because we spoke about, is it Von Miller? It's Ed Oliver, it's Gregory Rousseau. We don't know about one tech. We're not 100% sure about depth pieces. We got some spots to fill. What are the surrounding pieces going to be like for Von Miller? Is it going to be that continued heavy rotation, which I think right now for Von Miller is necessary? To have that continued heavy rotation, they're going to have a nice complement of guys that's going to have to be signed or going to have to be drafted for the Buffalo Bills. How seriously do the Buffalo Bills and that organization, Brandon Beane and company, take take the defensive line? Are they going to spend money on the defensive line this offseason? How much money are the Buffalo Bills going to get up to spend money, to have money this offseason? Will defensive line be an early pick in the draft? We're all talking about wanting a receiver in the first round. Is an edge rusher or a defensive tackle in play? So a lot of answers that's going to be solved starting within the next week or so, couple of weeks, starting with free agency.
And not to dig into the edge defender position, because I know we're going to spend a few minutes talking about all of the defensive positioning groups, but it's Greg Rousseau, Kingsley Jonathan, and Von Miller under contract right now. That's it.
That's it.
So if we're talking about a rotation, someone's going to have to be added because that's what McDermott does. So again, we're not talking about the draft. I don't want to talk about the draft until after free agency because it's too soon. But defensive end and defensive tackle are a huge need on this team right now, not only for this season, but a contingency plan for 2025, 26, and beyond. So just something to think about. All right, let's talk about the Bills' additions that were made. So we talked about this last week. We talked about the backup quarterback position. We talked about how important it was to have a guy here more than one season. I said that we should just sign a guy to a three-year contract and have somebody here so we don't have to do this musical chairs game every single year with the backup quarterback position. We both agreed that Mitch Trubisky was probably the right guy. We talked about time on task. We talked about the fact that he knows Josh. He knows Joe Brady. He's been here in Buffalo before, probably has a really good relationship with, all the offensive players that are most of them are still here. So 2 years, $5.25 million. He's got 2.7 guaranteed. So they got him for 2 years. I think that's a good. A lot of people were complaining about this signing.
The contract. Why didn't he get a minimum base salary? How can you give him $2.7 million? I'm like, bro, give me a break.
No, regardless of if you're a backup quarterback or not, you're not going to get paid $1.3 million to be a backup quarterback unless you're the third string. Like that doesn't happen. Like they don't pay those. And if you look at the market for backup quarterbacks on top of the season that we just came from, with all the backup quarterbacks starting for teams contending for playoffs, like the backup quarterback position is important. Now, I will say this. We have arguably one of the most reliable, durable, tough-nosed quarterbacks in the NFL. He has the current streak for the most consecutive games started by an NFL quarterback. But I will say this. Streaks don't last forever, right? And I'm not trying to jinx anything and throw any bad juju out into the universe, but Josh Allen got injured 2 years ago. Josh Allen got injured last year. It only takes one hit for it to not be the right injury for Josh Allen to where he can't play. And if you need someone, I feel better with Mitch Trubisky than I do Kyle Allen, honestly, because we have someone who's got a bunch of playing time. And say what you want about how his career ended in Pittsburgh, and how it ended in Chicago. I think Mitch Trubisky was just in some crappy situations where he wasn't in a place to be successful. So what's your take on that?
He was in a situation. Now, of course, Mitch Trubisky is a backup quarterback for a reason, but I think he could be a solid backup quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, coming from a situation where he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had Matt Canada as an offensive coordinator. We know how Pittsburgh Steelers fans felt about Matt Canada and his struggles with the offense. Then they went and had a offensive coordinator by committee, had a tandem of offensive coordinators, but that is that situation in Pittsburgh. If the Buffalo Bills and Joe Brady are going to do certain things to help Josh Allen, ultimately that can help Mitch Trubisky as well. God forbid Josh Allen goes down. And what's the goal for the offseason with Josh Allen? We want to get him more weapons, and we want to get him weapons that can take pressure and alleviate that pressure off of Josh Allen. So if we can get players that can alleviate pressure off Josh Allen, God forbid he goes down, those same players can do the same thing for Mitch Trubisky in a 2 or 3 game stretch. So that's the hope for me as a Buffalo Bill when I take off my content creator cap and put on my fan cap. Let's put some weapons around Josh Allen and or Mitch Trubisky if need be, just in case something like that happens.
I like it. All right, so we'll go through the rest of the Bills signings here. So they signed Quentin Morris, no surprise, 1-year deal. Guy, again, we talked about it last week. Time on task. It's the guy that's familiar with the system. I don't know the numbers on it. I haven't seen them yet, but it's a 1-year deal. Bring a guy that's familiar with the offensive system. I think it's a great move. David Edwards, we talked about the 2-year extension that he got. He got almost $3 million guaranteed. It's a 2-year extension for $6 million. I think that he's probably slotted right now as the roster is constructed today here on March 9th. He's probably the starting left guard. He's getting paid to be the starting left guard. Now, I don't know if the Bills find somebody else via free agency or the draft that can come in and compete for that position. But he's on the roster now. Taylor Rapp. So the early contract numbers that were reported were a little inaccurate. I think people kind of jumped the gun at the 3 years, 14.7 that was reported. It's actually 3 years, 10.6. And the rest of it has to be, it's all incentive based, which means, like I said, it could be Pro Bowls, it could be tackles, it could be games played, it can be interceptions, it can be all pros. Like there could be a bunch of stuff that cannot be reached basically just because it can't be reached. What's your thoughts on the Bills bringing back Taylor Rapp? We touched on it earlier as part of this might have been something that the writing was on the wall type deal. But what's your thoughts on Taylor Rapp and the Bills giving him a 3-year contract?
I believe that Taylor Rapp was the contingency plan all along since last year, like I alluded to earlier in the show. I believe last year, Brandon Beane went to Taylor Rapp and said, "Hey, we want you now. We want to sign you now. It's going to seem like a short-term deal, 1-year deal, but we have situations where we might have 1 or 2 safeties that may not be with the Buffalo Bills in the near future. We want you to come in, establish yourself as that hybrid safety this year, and we're going to ease you into a possible starting opportunity next year, and we'll be able to sign you to a multi-year deal." So I believe that was the discussion a year in advance. Getting back to Taylor Rapp signing 3 years, $10 million. It's a cap-friendly deal. $2.8 million in 2024, 3.7 in 2025. 2026 is about $4 million, but the dead cap is a little over $500,000. So if the Bills wanted to, this could essentially only be a 2-year deal. I like how he played towards the end of the season. He came on. He had a big interception against Miami, sealing the deal there. I believe he would have definitely helped us out in the playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think he was missed a little bit there. We could have used some bodies. Ultimately, I think Taylor Rapp is a bridge to stopgap safety. Perfect world, the Buffalo Bills hit on 2 safeties. They hit or land signed 2 safeties that has talents superior to Taylor Rapp, and Taylor Rapp can be an excellent depth piece. At worst, Taylor Rapp mans the starting strong safety position, and we have somebody that is that mans the free safety position, and we have Taylor Rapp as our starting strong safety. So I like the contingency plan the Buffalo Bills was thinking. Is Taylor Rapp the guy that fits that plan? We'll see.
That's what I was going to say. Do you think if you look, if you take a deep dive into his contract and you look at what he's going to be making in 24 this year, does that scream starting safety money to you? Or how? So hold on, I'll even go even further. How many times did we see the Bills play 3 safeties last year?
Yeah,
a ton, right? So to me, this doesn't say that he's a starting safety. He's probably going to be in the mix, of course, for one of those safety positions.
Of course.
But this could be the same role that he was in last year. If the Bills find somebody in free agency or in the draft, or he is that guy that there until the person that the Bills bring in the draft or what have you, that can replace him.
Right.
So I see this as a good signing just because time on task, again, what he was able to do last year. Does he need to clean up the penalties? Absolutely. I think there's some stuff that he needs to work on. Is he going to be Jordan Poyer up in the box, making impact plays in the run game? I don't know. I saw some of that last year. I didn't see enough of it. He's got a smaller sample size than I would like to have to compare all this to. But to me, I still think that they're going to be extremely active in the free agent market for safety, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But overall, I like the deal. I kind of wish they would have announced it possibly the day after they released Jordan Poyer for whatever reason, for sentimental reasons, but that's neither here nor there.
Right.
All right. So we didn't touch on the Ryan Bates trade. He was traded for a 5th-round pick, which to me, I like the move and I don't like the move. I don't like the move because now you don't have a backup plan if Connor McGovern doesn't work out at center, but I like the move because they got a 5th-round pick when they just had their compensatory pick move from a 3rd that we thought to a 4th. So you might need to use this 5th-round additional pick to move back up onto day 2 to get a 3rd-round pick, because now you don't have a 3rd-round pick because we traded that one that we owned for Rasul Douglas last year. We were banking on that Tremaine Edmonds signing was going to get us a 3rd-round pick. But if people aren't used to the compensatory formula or don't know what it is, playing time is a big part of the compensatory formula. And Tremaine Edmonds missed playing time last year. And I think that's what graded him from a round 3 to a round 4 pick. But anyways, how do you feel about the Ryan Bates trade now that we know Mitch Morse is gone?
I don't mind it. I always thought Ryan Bates was a tad overrated. I was never
and overpaid.
That part, right? So, and that's no disrespect to Ryan Bates. I think that he's a decent depth piece, but I think people think he might be better than he actually is. And if I am wrong, then with the Chicago Bears, he has that opportunity to prove me so. So I wasn't mad at the Buffalo Bills trading Ryan Bates and getting a 5th-round pick, especially the history that Brandon Beane has drafting late. If they chose to draft that 5th-round pick, he also have a history of trading picks as well. But I'm looking at, can the Bills be looking at their offensive line situation like this? They're like, you know what? We have Aaron Cromer, who's the offensive line coach, and now with the Buffalo Bills season, he's probably getting views and getting looks as one of the better offensive line coaches in the NFL. Why I say that? Deion Dawkins had a hell of a season, right? Osiris Torrance came, plug and play, 2nd-round pick. Of course, he had his struggles as a rookie guard, but overall, he had a successful rookie campaign. We was all worried about Spencer Brown playing the right tackle position, coming from a small school, coming and having the nagging injuries. We was worried about, can he protect Josh Allen from the right tackle position? We haven't been talking about Spencer Brown at all.
We were all wrong about Spencer. I'll admit it. I'll raise my hand in class and say that I was wrong about Spencer Brown. Okay?
We haven't mentioned Spencer. We probably haven't mentioned Spencer Brown in 2-3 months. And when you don't mention offensive linemen, that is always a good thing. But could it be the Buffalo Bills brass is thinking the same way and like, you know what? Our coaching staff is a big reason for the success, the individual success these players have, and the overall success of the unit. We can go ahead and make some moves and get other players in here, get another guard in here, and develop him the same way. He may have his struggles in the beginning, but we believe in our coaching staff and we believe in our developmental process and progression within our offensive line staff to get good play out of our offensive line and whatever player or players we may acquire this offseason.
So what you're saying is that Brandon Beane is in tune with Sean McDermott, because that's the same sentiments that you said about the secondary and what I talked about with the safety position.
Exactly.
Brandon Beane knows what the coaching staff needs and what they have and what they can do if they need to make changes. So, but no, your analysis was that was perfect. Like, that was spot on.
Yeah,
other than that, I think we covered all of the Bills' 15 moves. 1/4 of the roster was overturned this week. So either adding, bringing back, or releasing. All right. So
wait, right quick.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on Rasul Douglas and getting his contract
Oh yeah, I forgot.
restructured.
I
He
forgot
got
about him.
he
I
got his
forgot about
contract
Rasul Douglas.
restructured, 2.5 million. We all was thinking that the
Extension.
Buffalo Bills it'll be an extension.
I
Now,
still
are you
think it could
surprised
happen.
there?
I still think it could happen. I
Mm.
still think they can get into the season and get back in talks. I don't think that this was because he didn't want to be in Buffalo. I think he is a very smart, savvy in his career. He knows that he's probably due another good contract before he's going to be on the back end of his career. And I think he's like, okay, you know what? What else, Brandon Bean? What else do we need to bring in here? Do we need to bring in some safeties? Do we need to bring in, whatever X players? I'll take a little bit of a hit. You're going to just give me a check anyways, and then we can revisit the situation later on. That's what happened in the past with some players on the Bills, where we were like, why didn't they just get an extension? They took a pay cut, but they got a roster bonus, and then we saw Brandon Bean would make or do extensions either towards the end of the year, halfway through. I feel like I feel like he wants to be in Buffalo. I think he felt like he was a huge part, and now he knows he's going to be getting all starting snaps as probably number 1A or 1B CB, right? Because Trey's now gone. So, I think I wanted an extension, because that would have been the easiest way to save money now and lock him up long term.
So here's why I like the move, and I like the fact that the Buffalo Bills did not extend him, and I think it bodes well for both parties. Thinking about Rasul Douglas, he played well last year, right? He played well last season. Some numbers: 4 interceptions in 9 games for the Buffalo Bills. Big corner, 6'2", 209 pounds. He made some impact plays for the Buffalo Bills. He is viewed as possibly a lower tier cornerback one in this NFL. And he's also 29 years old, right? So he's probably looking at it as, you know what, I'm trying to capitalize
Right.
and maximize what's probably going to be my final contract in
Right.
the NFL. So as much as I love the city of Buffalo, I have a family. NFL players, they
Right.
get about their family, even though they're making millions of dollars, they got to feed their family. It confuses me, but whatever, right? And
Right.
I think that could be a situation that's going on. And for the same on the Buffalo Bills side of things, right?
Right.
I'm not mad that the Buffalo Bills didn't sign him to extension. Why? Because he's 29, going on 30 years old as well.
Right.
And once you hit that age, even though he's playing well, they can be from one year to the next. We've seen steep declines in players, and that's definitely a possibility, especially when you get into the football advanced ages of 29, 30, and 31 years old. So I like the wait and see approach from both sides.
I like it. All right, let's talk. I want to bring this up real quick because I know it's been floated out there about the departures on the defensive side of the ball for the Bills.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to name these guys that are not currently under contract by the Buffalo Bills, including the ones that they just released. So in no order, anyone.
Mhm.
Cam Lewis, Dane Jackson, Shaq Lawson, Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, Poona Ford, Tim Settle, Linval Joseph, Leonard Floyd, AJ Epinesa, Terrell Dotson, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White. No longer on the Bills roster. They all played for the Bills last year. So there's a lot of holes to fill. And I say this to say that everybody's talking about these 11 draft picks that Brandon Bean has. They're not going to use them all. He's not going to use them all. He's going to trade up and trade back and do all this and that. He might use a lot of those 11 draft picks because there's a lot of positions that need to be filled, if not for the future, but to bring into camp to compete with whatever he does in free agency, because they're losing a ton of reps on defense. And like we talked about earlier, this will bleed into our next our topic of conversation. Defensive tackles on the roster: Ed Oliver
Mhm.
and Eli Anku.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
So I asked you this, and I asked our team this earlier today. is defensive tackle the second biggest need on this roster right now? Is it the first biggest need on this roster right now? We all want weapons for Josh. Wide receiver's been the only thing talked about for 4 months, 5 months. Back in December, when this team was on the fringe of not making the playoffs, or I'm sorry, November, and everybody was having a midlife crisis, and the team was, oh my God, what's going on? We need more weapons. We need more weapons. It's been wide receiver in round 1 in every single mock draft, like from now until the end of the time. Mm-hmm. But what do you think about the defensive tackle? Is it that position?
It's definitely a major need for the Buffalo Bills. We have to be realistic here, right? We have to take into account who our head coach is. Our head coach is a defensive-minded head coach. So I believe in the opposite, right? I believe if you're a defensive-minded head coach, you should probably lean towards the offensive side of the ball and vice versa. But defensive-minded head coaches, offensive side of minded head coaches lead to the side that they're on. And we all know Sean McDermott, and Brandon Beane and company, they have a history of drafting defensive linemen. They have a history of drafting edge rushers in back-to-back rounds. They have a history of drafting defensive players early in the first round. And if there is any time to do that in the Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane era, it would be this year. It would be this year. When you're cutting all these players and you're releasing all these players, who do you want to replenish the players that you cut with? The hope is you get to replenish these players with young players, players that can come up and grow with the team, players that can come up and now be the future and the future core for the Buffalo Bills. And you can keep restocking and replenishing that way. So that is the hope for the Buffalo Bills. And the only way you're going to do that is by drafting these players as opposed to trying to buy certain guys in free agents.
Right. I think if you can draft a one tech to sit next to Ed Oliver for the next 4 years, I think you're in good shape because Ed Oliver's already gotten paid. So that contract's already signed, sealed, delivered. And you know what you got in Ed Oliver. And I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a minute because a lot of people, and myself included early on last year, were critiquing Ed Oliver a little bit about how he only played, he only showed up in like 3 or 4 games and, he really wasn't the same player every week. And then my mindset changed on Ed Oliver a lot. And the reason why for this year, we saw Ed Oliver, I think we talked about it. You and me talked about how he might've been the defensive MVP of this team for a while. And then everybody was complaining about how he didn't show up down the stretch. Well, you know what? They stopped rotating Ed Oliver heavily like he used to be. They were rotating the one tech in and out. Ed Oliver was playing a ton of snaps the whole season, and he probably got a little tired down the stretch. I'm not making excuses for the man, but when you go from playing 3 years of a rotational 50% of the snaps to playing 80% of the snaps for the whole season, that's going to wear on you a little bit. And I don't see a lot of people talking about like the same with like Leonard Floyd down the stretch. He's not getting any younger. Latavius Murray down the stretch. He wasn't getting any younger. So these players become a lot less effective down the stretch because the wear and tear of the season, it hits them in week 16, 17 postseason. So I just thought that needed to be brought up. But I think you're spot on with the defensive tackle position. I think we need to find somebody young that we can find that will work out as a one tech that we can line up next to Ed Oliver for 3 or 4 years, sprinkle in some free agency. It's not a huge crop of free agents, defensive tackles that I think that the Bills can actually afford. So do you want to talk about your free agent DTs? Like what guys did you think that the Bills should take a look at? Is there names out there specifically for this position that you want to take a look at? Now, based off of one tech, 3 tech, or just the need itself?
Now, ultimately, because the Bills are thin at the defensive tackle position, I do think they should and possibly can draft and sign a player in free agency. You want to get the super chat right quick before we move on?
Thank you, Scott Van Leeuw, for the super chat. These always get priority. We'll always put them up on the show. Do you think we should trade the bank for Marvin Harrison? Is he that good, or do you think we should trade it back to get more picks? Thank you again, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
I'll let you take this one.
Marvin Harrison, you just got to move up too far in the board in the draft to get Marvin Harrison. He's projected to go top 4 in the NFL draft, where the Buffalo Bills pick 28. It's just too much, and I don't think it's a realistic option at the time. But appreciate the super chat, Scott. But yeah, getting back to the defensive tackle position, I think ultimately the Buffalo Bills, because they're thin at the position, should and would draft and sign a free agent defensive tackle. But just thinking about the defensive tackle position as far as free agency, right? First of all, it's like, what's the belief that you have with the Buffalo Bills and how they're going to attack free agency? Me as a fan, I want to believe that the Buffalo Bills are not done in terms of playing with the money and restructuring contracts. Josh Allen's a possibility, right? Matt Milano's a possibility. I don't know how I would do Matt Milano, but he's definitely a possibility. Stephon Diggs, Dawson Knox, Deion Dawkins with a possible extension. I don't know what that tweet was about earlier.
Yeah, do we want to talk about the cryptic tweet for a minute?
I don't know if I do. I don't know what it was about. I don't know what it was about.
I hate cryptic tweet off-season time. Like, it had like the guy walking away in the sad face emojis. Like, does this mean you're leaving? Does this mean you have a health concern? Does this mean that you just are about to sign a massive contract extension? Like, what does it mean? It just confusing. Right. Anyways, sorry, carry on.
No, I like it. But I was talking about Deion Dawkins. Yeah, ultimately getting back to the defensive tackle position, and with how I feel about the Buffalo Bills and free agency, I would love for them to restructure some contracts and get up to 30, possibly $40 million and become a player in free agency in terms of getting some mid-tier assets. Probably no splash Von Miller kind of signings, but definitely some mid-tier assets. And a couple of assets I see from the defensive tackle position. If I'm starting with the obvious first, I'll give you the obvious, right? Everybody's obvious. Daquan Jones, right? He signed a 2-year, $14 million deal previously to come to the Buffalo Bills. I think an extension like that probably give him a $1 million raise, maybe 2-year, $15 million deal. I think that is definitely feasible and possible for the Buffalo Bills. He's not breaking the bank. He's expressed desires and interest to coming back to Buffalo. So I think that is something that can possibly be done and get the one tech that time on task and continuity back between Daquan Jones and Oliver. So I think that is definitely a good option. But I want to give a surprise option here because I do think that this guy also would not break the bank, and I don't think that he's known or being talked about as much. And that is the 6'4", 314-pound one-tech defensive tackle from the Indianapolis Colts, and his name is Grover Stewart. This guy, Grover Stewart, is not impressive in terms of a stat sheet filler, but I look for guys that has impressive traits. And Grover Stewart, defensive tackle from the Indianapolis Colts, he's been a plus run defender his entire career. 77.3 rush grade last year at the age of 30 years old. He had a 6-game suspension last year with the Colts. During that 6-game suspension, the Colts gave up 4.7 yards per carry and gave up 153 yards per game during Grover Stewart's 6-game absence. The 11 games Grover Stewart started and played for the Indianapolis Colts, they allowed 3.7 yards per carry and 107 rushing yards per game. So that one player was a big difference for the defensive front in Indianapolis Colts. And in my opinion, they better be looking to re-sign him. But if not, I would love for the Buffalo Bills to take an opportunity to talk to Grover Stewart. If you don't know about him, look him up a little bit. DM3. I will applaud you to look up Grover Stewart as well. I think you'll like him as a piece at the one tech defensive tackle position.
I agree with you on Daquan Jones, and I don't think he's going to cost as much as everybody thinks he does. Here's the reason why. He's 32 and he's coming off of an injury that he made him miss most of the season. We saw Daquan Jones beginning of the year. He was an all-pro. Like, that was the Daquan Jones we thought we were getting the year previous. So I don't know. I haven't seen anything out there that they're actually in talks. Brandon Beane said a few weeks ago that, everything is always a discussion and, there's always a possibility, but I haven't seen really much. What about Foley Fatukasi? Have you seen anything? What are your thoughts on him? And I know he had a visit with the Bills. I don't know if that's a right scheme fit or not, but what's your thoughts? He played 4 years for Jacksonville, so he's a little bit on the younger side, but he's only got 13 career sacks, which is not crazy because he's a defensive tackle, but I was looking up some of his numbers on PFF and I wasn't overly impressed. And Spot Track has him like market value of like $8 million per, which I don't see why he would be that highly rated to get a contract like that. But what's your thoughts?
I don't think that he's worth $8 million per. Like you said, I haven't seen anything on tape or statistically to really jump out and spark my interest about Foley. So I wouldn't be a fan in terms of signing him to that type of value, $8 million, and commanding the starting one tech defensive tackle spot. What I would like him as a part of the rotation, a rotational piece that can come in and provide a spark on in certain downs and distances. I think he can be a possible upgrade over a Jordan Phillips. I think that he can give us a more consistent rotational play from the defensive tackle spot than a guy like Phillips. So I would like him as a rotational piece. I would definitely question as a starter and giving him that type of money that Spot Track suggests.
Yeah, I don't see next week there being a big splashy name thrown out there. I think that there might be some guys that are going to be depth pieces, and I think that they're going to look at the draft and try to see if that's something they can address there. And then after the draft, Bean's always adding guys that are late camp casualties, or I have a couple mil left like he did with Puna Ford, but then Puna Ford never played last year. So, those things happen. All right, let's move on to defensive end because we're getting long and we're almost to an hour and a half.
Yep.
Under contract currently for the Buffalo Bills is Greg Rousseau, Von Miller, Kingsley Jonathan. You have any guys that stand out for defensive end that you're keeping your eye on? It's a huge market this year. It's all over the place as far as age gaps, from top to bottom. There's experience, all kinds of the market values are all over the place. I just don't know if the field is just watered down. What's your thoughts on the edge defender?
Some players catch my eye. Again, AJ Epinesa, Brandon Beane talk about, draft, develop, and re-sign. Well, that can be an excellent motto for AJ Epinesa. 26 years old, in the prime of his career. We've seen steady improvements from him. I think, if we can get him on a reasonable contract, multi-year contract, 2-3 years, maybe about $6 million per, I wouldn't mind. 6.5, maybe throw some incentives in there. I wouldn't mind AJ Epinesa back. If we're talking about guys that can fill a short-term role, kind of like some one-year deals we had last year, I'm looking at maybe a Danico Autry, 6'5", 285-pound defensive end from the Tennessee Titans. I like him because of his stout size and his body frame, and the Buffalo Bills always tend to struggle run defense at some point of the season. So I was looking at ways of how can we become a stronger defensive front against the run. And I think adding a guy like Nico Autry and a guy like Grover Stewart can upgrade the rush defense for the Buffalo Bills. So I like the Nico Autry, the former Tennessee Titan. And last but not least, I know we speak about end of eras and releasing guys because of cap casualties and their age and past their prime, but Calais Campbell, I know he's about to be 90 years old, but
I think he's 30. I think he's 34, right?
He's about 38, 39, bro.
Is he
But
really?
but once again, he was stout against the run. He'll be 38 when the season starts. So he was an 80 overall PFF grade. He was an 80.2 grade against the run. In 12 years, his lowest grade run defense was about a 64.7 for PFF. So for his career, he's just a great stout run defender, and because he has that attribute, I believe Calais Campbell can be a rotational piece that can help the Bills. If, of course, with the rest of free agency in the draft, you give the right complements and pieces to go around your defensive front. So Calais Campbell, AJ Epinesa, Denico Autry is three defensive ends that's on my radar for the Buffalo Bills.
I like it. Hey, do you think, follow-up question, do you think that AJ Epinesa, his progression and his development was hindered a little bit by Von Miller being here? Not talking about leadership and learning how to watch film and, hey, let's go practice swim moves with Von Miller. Like, I'm talking about getting game reps. Because there was games when I was like, holy shit, AJ Epinesa has been the best defensive player in this game. And then there was times when like, where the hell is AJ Epinesa? Oh, that's right, Von Miller's on the field. It's against the Miami Dolphins, and Von Miller's on the field, and this is for the AFC East title. You know what I'm saying?
I get it. I just believe the fact that Sean McDermott employs a heavy rotation,
Right.
that I don't think that Von Miller hindered any snaps or any reps from AJ Epinesa.
I've seen.
I like it though.
We've all seen the progression
Mhm.
of AJ Epinesa. You need to lose weight. AJ Epinesa, you need to gain weight. Okay, AJ Epinesa, you're like wrecking shop. Like, you look like you're the best defensive end that we have. And then there's AJ Epinesa, who looks kind of lost on the field. So I don't know. I just wanted to see if that was possibly something. So hopefully we add somebody to the rotation here. I think this is something also addressed in the draft. I'm not saying early, but I think at some point they'll draft somebody, and there will be somebody brought into free agency. One of the guys you named or somebody else. There's a ton of experience out there. Yannick Ngakoue is always out there. There's plenty of guys that the Bills can bring in. All right, let's move. I don't want to spend too much time on cornerback because I think the Bills will address it, but I think it's depth at this point because they have Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, and Kyer Elam. I would have said we would have not even had to bring it up if Trey wasn't released, but I think you still need to bring somebody in because Cam Lewis is gone and Dane Jackson's gone. I don't know if they bring Dane back or Dane tries to go and say, maybe I can try to fight for starting reps somewhere else. He's been here, 5 years? He was with the Bills 5 years, I believe. So, or was it 4 years?
4 years.
So I don't know if that's something the Bills want to look at late in the draft, like maybe late day 3, or just some guys that are being released. Jamarcus Ingram, I know, is on the practice squad. So what's your thoughts on cornerback? We don't have to touch on it too much.
Yeah, I didn't go heavy in terms of statistical findings and things of that sort, but a couple of cornerbacks that I had in mind was, we have Rasul Douglas and we have Christian Benford. Those are the starters. Dane Jackson, I believe, provided that depth along with Kyer Elam, and that Kyer Elam's been up and down. He showed that spark last year when he had that interception, and we hope year 3 can be the best year of Kyer Elam's career. But I still think we need another corner to maximize the potential of the cornerback room. And one guy that I have in mind is a guy that was supposed to be better than what he actually is thus far in his NFL career. Cornerback Christian Fulton. from the Tennessee Titans. He was a former second round pick, came out of LSU. I believe he was a good cornerback coming out. I wanted him at that time over AJ Epinesa. I believe they came out in the same draft. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out for Christian Fulton with the Tennessee Titans. He's shown flashes, but struggled to find his footing. So that's a guy that I wouldn't mind to see coming into the fold for the Buffalo Bills, because we know Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, they look for those guys that have that ability and have that talent, that possibly had down seasons, and we can utilize that in terms of getting them in a reasonable contract because of that down season. But understand that in our defense, we can maximize the potential. So I'm hoping that that can come to fruition if we was to get a guy like Christian Fulton. And one more guy, my bad. One more guy. I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. Teron Johnson, I love him. I believe he should be up for an extension, but you know, he got banged up quite a bit last season with concussions. I believe he suffered multiple concussions. So a guy like Kassan Nixon, a slot cornerback from the Green Bay Packers, who showed a lot of promise and has a ton of versatility. I think he could come in immediately and step in and be our kick returner, punt returner immediately. So he holds that value, and he can come in and back up Teron Johnson at nickel cornerback. So former Green Bay Packer Kassan Nixon and Christian Fulton are two cornerbacks that I had on my radar.
All right, I see Levi Wallace in the chat. Stop it. No, thank you. That's no knock on Levi Wallace, but we've already been there, done that. No. My concern is, where do they stand on Kaiir Elam? Because everybody's got an opinion on Kaiir Elam. I am under the opinion that they should not give up on Kaiir Elam. I think that he's just extremely raw and needs to be fine-tuned. And there's a lot in there to like about his game. Instinctually, he's intelligent. I just think that it's coaching. And the Bills brought in a new, younger DBs coach that I think John Butler, I just don't think was getting it done. That's no knock on John Butler, because I know he was a good coach, but I think that the Bills are looking to kind of revamp with this whole youth movement. They're doing the same thing with coaching. We talked about Bobby Babich, young guy, right? We talk about all these other coaches that are bringing in. They're going with a youth movement. You talk about Bobby Babich over Leslie Frazier. There's a huge, gap in age there in relatability to these players. So I'll ask you this question, and this doesn't have to be a full-blown discussion point. Who was CB1 on the Bills?
CB1?
Yeah.
Cornerback one?
CB1. Who is CB1 for you?
Russell Douglas.
Okay. I say it is Christian Benford.
Okay. Why?
If you look at a lot of film from this past season, he was hardly targeted he wasn't targeted nearly as much as Rasul Douglas was. Now, if that's an intelligence issue with opposing quarterbacks, and I know Rasul Douglas had the forced fumbles and the interceptions and stuff like that, and I thought that he was one of the best defensive players on the team by far this season. If you dig into Christian Benford's numbers this past year, it's pretty freaking remarkable. The QB rating, the completion percentage allowed. I think he gave up one touchdown all season. There's a lot. You have to go back and dig into PFF stats and just really dive down into it. It's really impressive. If you look at, you got to figure he was going up against the second best wide receivers, right? So that's typically the guy that's going to get picked on. Because if you're matching up, we talked about this with Tre'Davious White for the longest time, right? People weren't throwing at Trey because they knew that they needed to throw it somewhere else, right? Mm-hmm. We talked about that Trey's entire career. Mm-hmm. He had for receivers against him because they just weren't throwing at Trey. Mm-hmm. Look at Christian Benford's numbers. They were throwing at Rasul Douglas more than they were throwing at Christian Benford. So there's definitely some respect for his game there, on top of the fact that I think he's better in the run game, in run defense, and I think that he's more physical than Rasul Douglas is. Call me crazy, and I love Rasul Douglas. I thought that it was one of Beane's best trades since he's been a general manager. But it's a good problem to have that we don't agree on who cornerback 1 and cornerback 2 is. Does that make sense?
And yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I like the argument. It could definitely be a compelling argument. You would think on first hindsight that it is Rasul Douglas, but when you do a deep dive and you do some evaluations and you see the type of play we've seen from Christian Benford, I can respect the argument. I think he gets a bad rap from going to UConn. UConn is known as a women basketball school and an NCAA team.
That's
Respect
true.
the
It's sad, but true.
respect men's basketball, but he was very successful there in his career. He was a ball hawk in Connecticut with 14 interceptions, and I know he was getting talked about with earlier in whispers about moving to safety because of the physicality and the presence that he brings, but if he's having success at the cornerback position, and he is, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right.
Now, I understand that athletically, he doesn't have the long speed, and because he doesn't have the long speed, and he possessed physicality, safety seems like a good move. But let's wait. He's still at his peak athletic ability for his age and his standards right now. Let him play 3-4 years, and if after that, then we can entertain. Once we get some dip in athleticism, that's when you want to start to entertain maybe a switch to safety. But right now, I really like Christian Benford as QB, CB 1 or 2.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? I think they have two solid corners where we were always, like you would say, toying with the position where we had to deal with not on Levi Wallace, but we had to deal with whoever was the second guy playing with, Tre'Davious White. So
my bad, Villanova, absolutely correct.
All right.
Fact check.
So I do think they'll add somebody. Like I said, it could be late day 3 pick. Somebody obviously in free agency because of the uncertainty that they may still be having with Kyer Elam. But let's move on to safety before we wrap up the show. So we talked about they signed Taylor Rapp, and somebody in the comments was talking about, we forgot to talk about the Matt Hack signing. You're right. We did sign Matt Hack, and they probably will obviously release Sam Martin. They're not going to have 2 punters under contract. That'll save about 1.3 mil. The reason people are talking and upset about this whole thing, let me explain to you. Matt Hack is a better holder, which is important to Tyler Bass. We saw Tyler Bass have a little bit of a meltdown towards the end of the season. He was extremely unreliable, and if they're trying to make the kicker happy that they signed to a franchise kicker deal, I understand. We want to flip the field. We saw Sam Martin too many times shank punts, and I don't think Matt Hack is any better. But if you're trying to fix special teams and there's not guys out there that you can get, Punt God's already signed. He's gone, right? So you can't knock the move for trying to make your kicker happy. So that's all I'll say. Moving on to the safety position. DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp. That's who we got under contract now. I know there's some guys on the practice squad and some future contracts, but one guy that became available this week is the guy that I want the Bills to go after, and that's Justin Simmons. What's your initial thoughts on Justin Simmons? You think he's too expensive?
Yeah, I think he's definitely going to be expensive. I like the size, I like the physicality, I like the presence, and I like the build of a Justin Simmons, and I wouldn't mind having him in Buffalo, but I just think that I want a guy. I think in our division, in our conference, going with against Patrick Mahomes and Burrow and Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, and quarterback after quarterback, week after week, I want guys that can cover, and I question Justin Simmons' coverage ability at times. Can he stay on guys? Can he cover? Can he cover the deep thirds? Can he play that cover safety that is going to be needed and necessary against a guy like Patrick Mahomes? And I'm not sure if he can do that. I know he's versatile, but I don't know about his coverage ability. I gotta look him up a little bit more.
I got a couple names because you guys know I've been passionate about the safety position for, I don't know, 4 years, because I know what it means to Sean McDermott. I also know Sean McDermott can kind of groom guys into being something special, even if they don't look special right now playing for somebody else. But in no particular order, these are the three guys that I have. I don't know Akeem's guys, so we're just doing this blind. Jeremy Chin, I feel like, is a guy that you can get in the price point that you can use money elsewhere. I think Jeremy Chin you can get between 4 and 6 million. That's the market value per PFF and per spot track. I feel like Carolina was just a mess the last 2 years. Head coaches in and out. Frank Reich made it 3 games this year. They fired him. So I feel like he started his career, and that's the player that the Bills can unwrap that package of who he was back then, kind of a hybrid player as well, something that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott like in their safeties. What's your thoughts on Jeremy Chin?
I like Jeremy Chin. I like the versatility that he covers. He can cover. He can drop down in the box. He can play some linebacker. He could run with running backs, tight ends. You know, he plays some slot nickel. So I like the versatility that Jeremy Chin brings. Can he stay healthy for an entire season? Is he durable to withstand injury? You know, the Buffalo Bills battle a lot of injury. We know it's a combative sport, but that's the main thing for our Buffalo Bills. I just want us to be healthy, be relatively healthy at times. That's mattered most. And I think the last couple of years, even though that's not an excuse and nobody's going to feel sorry for us, injuries has been the detriment to the Buffalo Bills in a lot of ways. So I do have durability concerns about Jeremy Chin, but I like the ability he can bring to the Bills.
You talk about injuries too. Age has something to do with it, don't you think? A little bit, possibly. Micah Hyde 2 years ago. Jordan Poyer was dinged up last year. Von Miller. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not going to ever talk bad about injuries because injuries suck. And I know it's something hard to come back from. But Darnell Savage Jr. from the Packers.
I like it.
I like it for 2 reasons. I like the player. I've watched a lot of film on safeties this offseason. I like the player. I like the physicality. I like what he could bring in the run game. Doesn't give up big plays over the top. He is physical, on top of the fact that you could pair him back up with Rasul Douglas. So there's continuity, there's familiarity. What's your thoughts on Darnell Savage Jr.?
I like him, man. I like his aggressive nature. I like his aggressive nature when the ball's in the air. I do think he's more of an in-the-box safety. I think he clashes with Taylor Rapp a little bit. So, you know, I still would think that even though I think it's necessary, I do think providing competition for Taylor Rapp is indeed necessary. So I like it in that aspect. And I think that if he had the battle of Taylor Rapp, he can possibly win the starting position. So I like it. I like the move. I do think he's more of a strong safety than a free safety.
Yeah. All right. I got one more. Jordan Whitehead. Not a huge name, but we're talking price point at this point, and it's $3 to $5 million market value. We all know he's the guy that picked off Josh 3 times last year in the opening game. What's your thoughts on Jordan Whitehead? I do like the size. I think he got a bad rap with the Jets. I just think the Jets last year defensively were kind of not what we really thought they were going to be. There was games when they were the defense we thought they were, but then there was times when their identity just kind of looked confusing. And their secondary, I think, is just full. They're stacked in the secondary. I feel like they have a deep roster in the secondary. So what's your thoughts on Jordan Whitehead?
I like Jordan Whitehead's physicality and aggressive nature. You better have your head on a swivel, catching passes over the middle when Jordan Whitehead's around. Otherwise, he's going to come in later wood. So I like the enforcer ability that he has. Again, he'll be battling with Taylor Rapp. I think he's more of a box safety. I think he's more of a guy that, you don't want to have him out in deep quarters or the middle of the field. You want him lined up close to the line of scrimmage in the box and being able to make plays around the ball. And I wouldn't like the acquisition as far as being a camp body to battle with Taylor Rapp.
That's all I got from my list. Who do you have that you wanted to talk about at safety? A couple before we get out of here.
Short and sweet. I'm on the side of the Buffalo Bills to possibly, if they're going to spend, if the Buffalo Bills can get up to 40 million, and if they can spend some money somewhere, where would it be? I would spend some money at defensive tackle, and I would spend some money at safety. And I know that, the Buffalo Bills 7 years ago did a great job acquiring Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, and they've been great players ever since. But I'm not sure how much times you can go ahead and do that and get a seventh round pick and him having the success he has, and getting a fifth round pick and having the success he has. So I want to go out there, spend a little money, and go out there and get New York Giants former safety Xavier McKinney. I think
like him a lot.
He's 24 and a half years old.
I just think the money is too much.
He has this best. Now, what's too much?
He's going to want 12 to 15, I think.
So you don't think the Buffalo Bills, if the Buffalo Bills can get up to 40 million, you don't think so? 4 years, 50 million, 12 and a half. You think it's too much?
No. Because we talked earlier about what McDermott can do with safeties, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how he can manufacture guys like Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. I just think if you look at Brandon Beane, he would make that contract be a defensive tackle or an edge defender deal before safety. Not saying he's not going to spend money on safety. I think they'll find one or two guys possibly.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see that much. I mean, McKinney was my guy that I love it. I mean, we put content out about him on our social media. I made an edit for him because I liked him. I like him a lot. I like what he would bring to this team. It would be a perfect, person for Sean McDermott to mold into this amazing. I just think he's too expensive. He's young. He's going to want that big payday. This is his first contract after his rookie deal. So.
Man, I think Xavier McKinney would just be perfect for the Sean McDermott defense.
I agree. I don't think they can afford him.
Okay. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
But no, that's not. I'm not trying to down.
No, you did already. You did, Debbie Downer. You did. It's okay. I got
I'm
another
not
name.
trying to downgrade your person.
So let's get into another guy that may be more affordable for DM3. Okay. I have this guy, former Rams safety Jordan Fuller.
Okay.
Jordan Fuller, former free safety for the Rams. Again, I'm thinking about guys that can cover space, that can cover multiple players in terms of tight ends and running backs and nickel wide receivers. I'm thinking in the division that we're in the conference that we're in, the receivers that we have, the quarterbacks that we have, you need to have guys that can cover. And I think Jordan Fuller is another guy, deep thirds, played in a lot of too high safety looks with the Rams, ball hawking kind of safety, had 3 picks, had a number of pass deflections. I think in the Sean McDermott system, he can definitely be able to carve a role and help us out on the defense. And I don't think he's going to be able to break the bank. I think we could get him at a cost-effective deal.
I think exactly what you said there too. A lot of teams are going to that too high safety. And if you look at the quarterbacks now in the AFC, it's ridiculous. The Bills finally get a franchise quarterback, and now every other freaking team in the AFC does the same thing in the last 5 years. But yeah, definitely that not just a ball hawking, but what is the one consistent thing that the Bills have been good at the last 7 years? And that's not giving up anything big over top. Like they might give up some stuff underneath and there's run after catch, but there's never anything going over the head of the Bills safeties. Never.
And last one. This one is more of the Taylor Rapp comparison. He tore his ACL in the beginning of the season and never got to play. Chuck Clark, the New York Jets, they traded for him last year, former Baltimore Ravens. He was a guy that was supposed to come over and man that safety spot for the New York Jets. He never made the field. He tore his ACL in practice. When he's healthy, he can be an enforcer, on the field. I like him. I like him in the box. I like him against the run. I like the physicality that he brings. And I think that being that he tore his ACL early last year, beginning of last year, I believe in training camp or even before then, I believe he can come in and compete for a spot for a depth piece for the Buffalo Bills at the safety position. So Chuck Clark, Xavier McKinney, Jordan Fuller on my safeties.
I like it. I like it a lot. All right. I think that's going to about do it. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Nah, man, we covered a lot in this
Everything.
hour and 45 minutes, and people's been rocking with us. We up to 820 people watching this show, 821, man. So this excellent show, bro.
Absolutely excellent show. We will be back next week with a whole bunch of more roster moves that Brandon Beane will make next week. My thoughts this week heading into Monday, Tuesday, or even as soon as tomorrow. I don't think Brandon Beane takes weekends off. Josh Allen restructure. These are my predictions. Josh Allen restructure, which everybody's predicting that, so I'm not trying to go out on a limb here. Taron Johnson extension. I think a Deion Dawkins extension's coming. I think they're going to work on Dawson Knox, Matt Milano, and Stephon Diggs. I'm not sure if they're going to do all of those three, but like you said, I think the Bills could end up with about $40 million when Wednesday rolls around, and I hope that there's a plan to fill some of these holes and not just swing for the fences. And I think Brandon Beane will hopefully do the right thing and get guys that value contracts. We hate the bargain bin shopping, but that's what the window that you're in when you have a franchise quarterback. So what's your thoughts, Akeem, before we go?
Yeah, man. That what you said, bargain bin shopping. I realistically, I gotta understand it, right? The fan in me is like, come on, Buffalo free agency, do something, surprise us, and give us something. Surprise us and give us something. But again,
I do think that there's something Beane will do that will be like, okay, because the year he signed Von Miller, he said, I will not be signing any flashy free agents. Any splash moves are not happening. I'm not saying he's going to do something crazy like a $25 million per year player, but you never know. He may be feeling the heat too, to win just as much as we want him to feel the heat to bring a team in here to win. So, but yeah, with that being said, we're getting ready to get out of here. Akeem, it was fun as always. We'll be back here next week, Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We thank you all for watching. As always, go Bills.
Who ready? We ready. Who ready? We ready. Been ready. I wait.